Hi everyone, my name's emeritus. I'm also known as Ranger Em. I'm an environmental communicator and educator, and I get to talk to a lot of different people about all things nature and conservation. I love to knowledge share, and that's what I want to do with you. So come on, let's go learn with Ranger Em. Today we're going to dive into the world of bats. They're not as scary as you think. We're actually going to talk about different stereotypes around bats, but also bat species, bat conservation. And this is all going to be with Brock Fenton, an emeritus professor with Western University, who is also going to tell us about different projects and where he explores to see these bats. So let's go catch up with Brock. Hi Brock, thanks for joining me today. I'm very excited to learn more about bats, but I was wondering if you could introduce us to yourself first and tell us a bit about your background.
All right, so my name's Brock Fenton. I'm an emeritus professor of biology at the University of Western Ontario. Well, I was not an emeritus, I was really doing it. I was doing teaching, but my research was always focused on bats. And that means field work mostly, and anywhere there's a good chance, that's where we go.
So I bet you've traveled quite a bit.
Yeah, right. And so we were in Belize for 2 weeks in late April, early May, and we'll be in Italy for 2 weeks in July. And we just keep an eye open for what we want to do and go to a place where you can do it. That's
very cool that even though you're still kind of retired, you're still getting to go on these projects.
Oh yeah. So the difference is, of course, you're not getting paid. And also you don't have to report to anybody.
That's actually perfect.
Yes, so it's very good for that, yes.
What kind of project are you working on? Like, what did you do in Belize?
Okay, so we started doing a lot of work trying to get photographs of things that fly. So that's bats and birds to ascent and insects. And so it means carrying a lot of gear, and you go to meet the animals where they are. And so we go down to Long Point, to the station there, and we've been getting a lot of photographs of birds there. For a while it was just the migrants and the songbirds, and then we started doing some raptors, and then we're about to go back and do some, at this time of year, a lot of birds are feeding young, so you have the adults coming back to the nest with their faces full of insects, which is pretty neat. For raptors, we go to a banding station. The banders catch the animals, we photograph them. We photograph them as they're leaving. So it's not like baseball, not pitching birds or bats. You get them to fly when they want to. So we get bats as they're coming back to their roost, which might be in a hollow tree or in a cave or wherever it is. And we get some of the ones that we catch, we release in a tent. We fly them in a tent. And again, we can photograph them there. So this allows you to get photographs you just wouldn't get otherwise.
So if it's all flying animals, you must have quite the camera set up to try and catch them.
We do. So we have an infrared beam that the workshop made up for us. So the bat or bird or insect breaks the beam and sets off the camera. So if you're shooting birds during the day, you have the camera, the bird is triggering the camera to get the picture. But you're also using a very short duration flash, so you freeze the action of the animal in flight. And that gives you a lot of detail you wouldn't otherwise get. For bats, especially at night, now you can have flashes and that's the only light. And so this means it could be in a cave or a mine, it could be in the basement, it depends where we're doing it, right? And again, the idea is the animal takes its own picture. And
a selfie, if you will.
Yeah, and sometimes it works and sometimes it doesn't work, right?
Did you know that ancient Greeks associated bats with the underworld and were considered sacred by Persephone, the daughter of Zeus and wife of Hades? To go kind of back to bats a bit, can you tell us a bit about bats? I feel like there's this idea that they're creepy and stuff, and I think they're very cute little flying mammals.
Okay, so there's about 1,500 different species of bats in the world.
1,500.
In Canada, I think we have 19. So bats are mammals. They give birth to live young. Mother bats feed their babies milk. They don't lay eggs. They don't build nests, but some bats build tents, which by biting leaves, so the leaf folds over.
Oh, cool.
They're very they need a secure roost, someplace where they're not going to get bothered. So that means that they tend to be very elusive. Well, they're small animals. That's something else about bats. The biggest bats in the world weigh about 2 kilograms, which is pretty small as mammals go. The smallest bats in the world weigh about 4 grams, which is about the same as a dime.
Wow.
Right? So you get all this different variety that do many different things. So the ones in Canada and the temperate zone in general are all insect-eating animals. So they're eating lots of insects. They eat probably half their weight in insects every day. So they're consuming an awful lot of food. In the tropics, you pick up fruit-eating bats and bats that visit flowers, sort of the equivalent of hummingbirds. And then you've got some bats that eat fish. You've got other bats that eat blood, the vampire bats. So they do many different things in the ecosystems where they occur. So they live a long time. So the oldest bats that we know of are about 40 years in the wild.
Wow, I didn't know that.
Yeah, so that's an animal that weighs 6 grams. And you think 40 years, that's older than a lot of students, right?
Yeah.
And then the other thing that they do, the females have 1 young a year usually, but the young is huge. So the young weighs 25-30% of its mother's weight when it's born.
Oh gosh.
So if mothers think about that, that's a pretty big investment. They're nocturnal. Most people don't see them very often, but they're there. And of course, one of the things bats do also is they echolocate, that is, they orient by sound. And if you have a bat detector, you can listen to them as they fly around. Otherwise, you wouldn't see them and you probably wouldn't even know they were there.
Very cool.
Yeah.
What's a bat detector?
Bat detector picks up the high frequency sounds the bats use in orientation. But the whole point is you don't have to catch the animal to know who's there.
Can we hear them making their echolocation with like
No.
our normal ear?
Well,
No.
okay, it depends on the bat.
Okay.
So most of the bats in Canada, you can't hear their echolocation calls.
Wow.
But if you're with a little kid, the kid can probably hear them.
Oh.
A good place to see bats if you're in this area is Pinery Provincial Park. If you go there at night, the bats come to eat the insects that are attracted to the lights, street lights or lights at the entrance to the park. And there's usually 5 or 6 species hanging around there.
Really?
And if you have a bat detector, you can hear everything, but otherwise you can just sit there and watch.
Oh, okay.
You can rent a bat detector and you can go out and walk around and see what bats you hear.
Wow.
Same in Toronto and High Park, they're doing the same thing. And I think the Toronto Zoo is doing the same thing.
Oh, very cool.
And this allows people to go out and perhaps see bats, but certainly hear them.
Another kind of big misconception possibly is around the idea of bats and rabies.
Rabies is a virus,
Mm-hmm.
and it's a virus of mammals. So dogs, cats, bats, those are the animals that usually have it. It's mainly the carnivores. So that's cats, dogs, foxes, skunks. Those are the ones that usually do. Now, the bats are interesting because everyone thinks that bats carry rabies. So if you're talking about a carrier is an animal that doesn't get sick from the disease, but spreads it.
Okay.
Rabies kills bats, so it's not something you play around with. This means that if you study bats, you get rabies vaccination. So the vaccination protects you from the disease. Some people don't think you need to do that, and they often die because rabies kills you. And once you show symptoms for rabies, that's it. It's just a matter of you dying when it happens.
Right.
So this means that we get our shots, then we have our titer tested to know that we have protection. We usually wear gloves when we're handling bats because they bite in self-defense, but usually is not always, right? So it just makes a challenge. If you're going to show bats, especially to kids, they want to touch them. So I can hold a bat so a kid can feel its wing and feel its fur, but it's not going to get bitten. I might get bitten, but it won't. The kid be, right? But people should leave them alone. I mean, the trouble with the bats is they're so small. So if you had a big brown bat in your hand, it would sit in the palm of your hand. That's an adult animal. And if it bites you, often it's the canine teeth, the eye teeth that break the skin, and you end up with just a small pierce, like sewing a needle on, right? Sewing a button on. And so that means you go to the hospital, to emergency, and you say you were bitten. And they say, well, where? Well, it was here. But then they can't see anything. So then people, that doesn't matter then. It's just a little bite. Well,
Oh,
To spread rabies, all the bite has to do is break the skin.
okay.
So that's why, yes, they're very small. They're, in a sense, they're dangerous because people tend, oh, well, so I got bitten, so what? Doesn't matter. Okay, perhaps it doesn't matter, but you'll find out pretty soon if it does. If you wake up in the middle of the night and there's a bat doing laps in your bedroom, the best thing to do is just get out of the room, close the door. Perhaps leave the window open so the bat can find its own way out. The trouble is they hide, and often they hide behind the curtains, and they're small, so they disappear and you can't see them. In the world, what, there's 1,500 species of bats, any of them could have rabies. So this means that it's not just in South America where there's vampires, or just in Toronto, or just in London. It's anywhere. And so therefore, just leave them alone.
Did you know the vampire mythology we are familiar with today has Slavic origins dating back to the 11th century? However, vampire-like legends have persisted in many cultures for millennia. I believe I heard that there's some bats in Ontario that are species at risk. Is that true?
I think there's 3 or 4 species that are listed. Okay, the problem with this is we have no idea how many bats there are. So I don't know how many big brown bats there are in London. I have no idea. So it's very hard to tell if there's fewer now than there were 20 years ago.
Right.
And to be listed, a criteria for being listed is your population has declined. So something that's caused a lot of population decline in some bats is a disease called white nose, which is caused by a fungus. And it's a fungus that loves the cold, so bats get it where they hibernate, caves and mines. What the fungus does is it disrupts their cycle of hibernation. So normally, bats go a long time without waking up. So animals, when they're hibernating, have to wake up every now and then to have a pee or something. And it costs them a lot of energy to wake up because you have to raise your body temperature from ambient up to, say, 30 degrees or 35 degrees. And that, the cost, one arousal costs about 60 days hibernation.
Wow.
So what's happened with white nose, it's disrupted the hibernation cycle, and the bats end up just starving to death.
Oh, wow.
So there's fewer little brown bats around now than there were. There used to be 2 big hibernation sites, both old mines here in southern Ontario. One over near Renfrew, the other near Barry's Bay. And each of them had about, say, 20,000 bats in them. And now you're lucky if you see 100. They're just way down. Perhaps the bats are getting over it now, and some of the bats are coming back, but the populations are still down. So in Ontario, we have 8 different kinds of bats. 8 different kinds of bats. In the city, it's big brown bats. In the countryside, it's little brown bats mainly. And then there's a small-footed bat, an eastern small-footed bat, and then there's a tricolored bat. There's 3 bats that do long-distance migrations. They appear to go away for the winter. That's red bats, silver-haired bats, and hoary bats. They never go into buildings. Well, never is a long time, but they're not house bats. And so, again, the thing is people, one bat looks like another, and often it's very difficult to identify them if you don't know your bats. So there's lots of puzzles there.
What is things that we can do for bats, like in our own backyards kind of thing? I know there's bat boxes.
You can put up bat boxes. Whether they use them or not is entirely up to them. And so often their idea of good real estate is not the same as yours.
Yeah.
In Toronto, I had a bat house in my backyard for, I don't know, 10 years, and I never saw a bat there. They're very picky about where they roost. So in this neighborhood, we have a lot of bats in the trees. We don't see them in the house.
Beyond kind of like putting up bat houses, there's not too much that...
I would say just leave them alone. And the thing is that find out about them, learn about them, because they're really astonishing animals. And if I go to do a presentation, I have a big brown bat, I hold it in my hand, everyone thinks it's a kid, a baby, right? Oh, it's full. It's actually, we know it's at least 8 years because that's how long we've had it in captivity.
Wow.
And so the oldest ones, I said, over 20 years, over 40 years in the wild, which is astonishing.
Bats are often misunderstood creatures and are rich in meanings. In many cultures, they symbolize rebirth, intuition, and the start of something new. I ask people to kind of submit some questions.
Yeah,
And I
sure.
was wondering if you wanted to do a fire round with some questions
Absolutely,
that
yeah.
people
I
have.
can try to answer anything you might ask.
What is your favorite bat species?
The one I'm holding. I haven't met a bat I don't like. So
Oh, I like that.
it's just, it's always exciting to see a bat you haven't seen before. And that's always been that way, and I doubt if it's going to change.
How many bat species have you seen?
I don't have a list. I mean,
No.
it's just, in Belize, the site we're working, we're over 30 species. The best place is Colombia,
Oh, cool.
because Colombia's got sort of Atlantic forest, Pacific forest, and Atlantic forest that's got the Andes. Probably there's 100 different kinds of bats in Colombia is what I would guess. I'm always excited to see one I haven't seen before.
What is the world's biggest bat?
World's biggest bat is a so-called golden-crowned flying fox that lives in Panama, the Philippines, and it's about 1,400 grams. It's a big bat,
Okay.
and it's a lot of bat.
Is it one of the vampire bats?
No, it's a fruit-eating bat. The
Okay,
vampire bats, there's 3 kinds of vampires. They all just live in South and Central America. They all just eat blood. That's their adult food, is blood.
All right.
They need 2 tablespoons of blood a day.
Wow.
And they, if you think of it, a vampire bat's about the same size as a hoary bat. So it weighs about 30 grams. It's not a big animal. But they make a bite with their incisor teeth. They take out a little divot of skin, and that gives them the blood they need. They have in their saliva anticoagulant, which keeps them bleeding. And the other thing is when the bat starts feeding, it almost immediately starts to urinate. And what it's doing is getting rid of the plasma from that blood meal, because there's no energy in plasma, it's just weight.
Oh, okay.
And they've got heat sensors on their faces so they can see where blood flows close to the skin.
These adaptations.
They share blood
my
with one
goodness.
another, so they're friends.
Oh,
The ones that
wow.
hang out together will share blood. So I mean, they are remarkable.
That is very
Yeah,
cool.
yeah,
Wow.
yeah.
We kind of already touched this, but where do bats go in winter, and what do they eat during winter?
Okay, so during winter here, they don't eat. They go either they go south, stay with the food the way birds do, or else they go and hibernate. When they're hibernating, their body temperature falls down to ambient, which inside a cave or a mine would be 2 or 3 degrees centigrade. And what costs them is to wake up because they have to pump up their temperature. And so big brown bats sometimes hibernate in buildings. That's fairly common. Little browns, not so much. Hoary bats, red bats, silverhead bats, they don't do that. They just go south.
Do different species hibernate together? Like they don't care?
In some places, so the mine at Renfrew, where I've been working for years, we have big brown bats and eastern small-footed bats actually in contact with each other when they're hibernating. But a roost may have different animals in it. And one of the things we don't know is what's the relationship between these animals. So in Belize, we found a cave we hadn't seen before, at least 5 species of bats in it, but we couldn't see inside to see, who's hanging out together and who isn't. So we don't know.
Okay. How long have bats been around? Is there
First
any
bats
idea?
are about 52 million years old.
Wow.
They're already perfectly good bats. So they have wings, they could fly. Whether they could echolocate's an open question.
How do you, scientists, find bat roosts?
The best way to find roosts is to put a radio tag on the bat and follow it home.
True.
That's way and gone the easiest way to do it because they are very good at hiding and they're so small, they're easy to overlook. I mean, I'm really laughing right now because this place we've gone to this area in Belize since 2007. And it's a resort, eco-tourist resort. And they've now just discovered they've got a colony of bats in one of the cabins. So we've been going there since, I don't know, 1995, and we didn't notice that, right? So they're very good at hiding, and they don't know. In the cave we found that we'd never seen before, it's just in the middle of a cornfield, and the bats start coming out of the cornfield, the roost, about just around dark, and an hour and a half later, there's still a stream of bats coming out of there.
Wow. That would be a cool
It's
sight to
very
see.
neat. It's very neat.
Why do they hang upside down?
Okay. So my theory is they're lazy. You hang upside down, you want to take off, you just let go and spread your wings.
True.
You don't have to jump around and flap. And that's as good a theory as anybody's. But I mean, of course, if all you do is let go, and that's all they do.
What is the most common species in this area?
Big brown bats. Big brown bats are the house bat. They are the ones that, as I say, they have twins, whereas little brown bats just have one young. They're still they weigh 15 grams, which is, again, a small animal. People often see them, I mean, they're often in buildings, which can be a problem. And if you handle them, you'll get bitten for sure. Don't.
So since you said it was big brown bat, what is the only difference size between big brown and little brown?
Oh, no, there's a bunch of, if you're a retentive biologist, there's a bunch of other features. But really, the big brown bat weighs about 15 grams. Little brown bat weighs about 6.
Okay.
So they're quite a bit different in size.
Yeah. Is it true they eat about 10 times their body weight in bugs every night?
I have a trouble with that because they certainly eat at least their body weight in insects every night. Now, the females need to do that just to produce enough milk to feed their young.
Wow.
So, because they're eating their own weight in milk every night, which is a lot of milk. It's because they chew their food up so carefully, when you look in their feces or their stomach contents, all you see is a mash of insects. Well,
yeah,
it's the insect. Okay, so is it a beetle or but what kind is it? Well, now using something called DNA barcode, you can identify it, so we can actually give you the menu for the bats, what they're eating.
Cool.
But they do eat lots and lots of food, and yeah, they're voracious. So the business about how much they eat is something that really astonishes people. And the trouble is, people say they eat their own weight. Yeah, perhaps they do. Sometimes it's hard to tell. The girl, whose name is Eleanor, is standing beside her weight in pizzas. And her brother is between half his body weight in pizzas.
Oh, wow.
And you look at that and you think of your favorite food. Ugh, right?
Blind as a bat.
Yeah.
That's kind of a misnomer, right?
Absolutely.
Like their vision's quite good.
They have eyes, they see really well. I think the reason people think they're blind is that if you see a bat in the sun, it's got its eyes all crunched closed. And everybody's heard of bat sonar, so why would they bother having vision? Right? Well, they don't need it, but they do. And it turns out that bats that have vision can see and echolocate do better than ones that have just one or the other.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Well, that's all of my questions so far.
Okay.
But before we wrap up, you've been showing us your book already. So this is one you've written.
Yeah.
And where can people find it if they were so interested in getting it?
It's online. You can get it online. I think the bookstore at Western has it. But if you ask most bookstores, they can just get it. It's an easy book to get.
Oh, perfect.
Yeah.
Okay. Awesome. Do you have any final?
No, I think, thanks for your interest. I mean, bats are fascinating. There's all these things you don't know about them. And that's one of the things that's interesting. Scientists are thought to be boring because they know so much and everyone gets tired. They always know the right answer, right? But the thing that's neat about science is not what you don't know. So it's not what you know, it's what you don't know that's exciting.
Yeah.
So you see something, oh, geez, I never thought of that, right?
That's why I like to keep learning.
Yeah.
Thank you for joining me, and thanks to Brock, who told us all about bats. If you're interested in his book, you can find it online. Until next time, see you in nature.